Cortland Simmons with you here on the 10th day of August in the year of our Lord 2018, and we're doing the CS Racing Report right here for you exclusively on CS Racing for 2018. It's been modified from CS TV simply because there is another outfit out there in the cyber world with that same logo and identifying stamp, so we want to modify it to CS TV for myself, Cortland Simmons. And like I said, click on that subscribe and that like button and show your enthusiasm if you like this show and like this podcast and would like to see more in the future, which I'm going to do whether I get any clicks or likes, regardless of whether I get them or not. But anyway, what we want to do is talk quickly about a couple things. We're going to do a quick synopsis of what took place in the preps at the end of July. That are considered to be the major ones, a lot like the Wood Memorial, the Santa Anita Derby, the Arkansas Derby, and so forth, prior to the Triple Crown, the Kentucky Derby being the first leg. And we'll talk a little bit about that, and then we want to also kind of do a little bit of comparing, even at this early stage, with a little bit of early forecasting on the Breeders' Cup, where these 3-year-olds stand in lieu of Justify's retirement against the older horses. And let's get into that right now. As far as where these numbers stand, this has been kind of the thing that I wanted to focus in and zero in on after these races, were contested. What's interesting is I did this before the buyers came out, and Andy Beyer, of course, is created that system years ago, and Matt Bernier from DRF is one of the go-to guys when it comes to numbers and crunching those figures along with time form. So I think we all were quick to try to make some snap judgments on where these horses stood, and to be quite honest with you, what we found upon doing this forensic investigation was very interesting, and really, to be honest with you, confirmed a lot of some of what might have been some clouds hanging amiss over the heads of these 3-year-olds. So in looking at the Curlin first, there isn't really a speed figure so much as it is a time evaluation. 150.18 for Hofberg, winning that race against, for all intent and purposes, an allowance field. So a 150.18, you extrapolate that in the splits that he got versus Good Magic, who ran a shade faster at 150.10, winning by almost 5 lengths over Provazo, with Lone Sailor third, and Core Beliefs, who nosed him out in the Ohio Derby previous to the Haskell, finishing 4th. So when looking at that, Good Magic got a 98 speed figure. He has never been one to really light up the tote board and create a continental shift with his buyers. You could be argued in the Bluegrass he was all out and he got that low speed figure, and that's why we don't like him in the Kentucky Derby. I loved his race in the Bluegrass at Keeneland and thought that it really was setting him up to possibly win the Derby, and he ran accordingly up to that form. He ran justifiably up to what one who those who supported him thought he would, to coin a phrase, justifying the performance. And he gets a 98 here. Not an overwhelmingly fantastic time. He runs a 150.10. Again, it could be argued, and certainly Chad Brown certainly would not disagree, that he was just geared down. We want to save a little something for the 10 furlongs of the Travers, and we know that every trainer ideally would want that scenario to unfold, where you can save a lot of energy and hope to have a little something left in the tank to turn those afterburners on at a supersonic level in the Travers Stakes, the Midsummer Derby. So that could be that could be plausible, but we just don't know. A lot of people are questioning not only that, but look at the Jim Dandy, the way that Tenfold drifted in the stretch. For those of you who've watched the tape a couple times, watched the video of it, he drifted in the stretch upon employing more pace pressing tactics, as I alluded to in the recap, the part 1 in the first recap of the Jim Dandy, Haskell, and the Curlin. And to me, it's not really ideally the strategy, but I think what Steve Asmussen wants to do is develop some versatility in the horse. Sometimes you can make a horse more tractable, adaptable, and able to sort of flip the switch and employ different strategies based on what is before you. And in the Jim Dandy, it could be argued that that the cards that were dealt to Tenfold were of such that Flame Away was the only speed, and they didn't want to allow him to go unmolested on the front end. And in the end, even though that is theoretically a good strategy, and it's commendable to do that, just like saving the caribou. This was a situation which almost backfired on him. He almost bit the bullet. He drifted, extremely wide in the stretch, similar to what Sporting Chance, who was also in that Jim Dandy, had done in the hopeful the previous years in the biggest 2-year-old race at Saratoga. And Sporting Chance also drifted out, had all kinds of trouble, but Tenfold on the lead, just it looked like he was going to blow by Flame Away and win by open lengths, with Vino Rosso possibly getting a piece of it as he was floundering in the stretch, and as Matt Bernier so accurately described, sort of ran in spots. It looked like he had no chance to hit the board, and then he came on strongly. Meantime, Tenfold was all over the racetrack, drifted out, reminded a little bit of what Sunday Silence did in the '89 Derby, maybe even to a greater effect. And luckily, this was the Jim Dandy, and this is something that, as I said before, has to be corrected in the days. And I think Steve Asmussen is going to pose the position or submit to everyone that this is something that we want to try. He'll get better at it in the Travers. He'll be more equipped to do it at a distance in which for those of you who think it's riskier to do that at 10 furlongs, we're going to be able to improve upon. But I think a lot of people, based on that 93 speed figure that he, Flame Away, and Vino Rosso posted, identical 93 buyer speed figures, that's the kind of low-end buyer that is more it's more common to the second tier horses, the horses that are being beaten by numerous lengths in big races, or they're running in smaller competitions. So this is something that you really can't be completely encouraged by. You cannot really put a lot of credence and stock in a 93 speed figure in a race like this. The track was obviously playing fair. You can't say that the track, Saratoga does have a surface that can be somewhat like Belmont from time to time, be a little tiring. But these are supposedly world-class horses. And a 93 speed figure and the winner drifting out in the stretch, I think a lot of question marks are going to be out there. As I said before, the multitude of $64 questions is really the title of what this 3-year-old is, really what best characterizes this group of 3-year-olds in the absence of Justify being retired, the triple crown winner. So now it's a question of who's going to be the James Bond, who's going to be the Mac Daddy of the 3-year-old division, who's going to really take control of it. So with these figures, once again, Good Magic 98 in the Haskell, and these 93s, this trifecta of 93s by the top 3 finishers, Tenfold, Flame Away, and Vino Rosso, it pales in comparison to the 110 buyer that Diversify ran in the Whitney the next week. This past weekend ran a 110 buyer, got a 132 time form, which is an off the charts performance. The final time of 149.62 is interesting though. It was a sunny day until right about the time in the preview, or in the minutes leading up to the Whitney, and it rained like Noah's Ark, and so it changed the racetrack, and in many ways it maybe even threw a bit of a what we call a curve monkey wrench on how you really clock this race from a time standpoint, not so much from a time standpoint on the stopwatch, but from a speed figure standpoint. But a 110 is the same number that you ran in the Suburban. So you've got a horse who's run dual 110s. The 3-year-olds have got to hope for a couple things to happen, and this is one of the question marks I've had about him prior to these numbers coming out, or prior to the numbers of the Whitney coming out, and that is is he gonna, can he carry his race, can he carry his form outside of New York? Richard Violette, his trainer, is a little bit, I wouldn't say skeptical, but he's a little nervous because, he skipped the Breeders' Cup Classic in 2017 after winning the Jockey Club Gold Cup, and ran in the Clark subsequently a few weeks later in and around the Thanksgiving period in Louisville, and he didn't run so well. So they're concerned with the Breeders' Cup being held at Churchill Downs, home of the Kentucky Derby, this year. That is a point of contention, and it's sort of a sore spot, at least in the mindset based on that Clark handicap. But the way this horse is performing right now, it may be a situation, it's a lot like California Chrome. One of the things that Chrome, one of his, weaknesses, or something that was not advantageous to him, was being pinned on the rail and being stuck behind horses. Well, he, as he developed over time, he overcame that symptom and was able to kind of overcome that deficiency and became much more effective. In the case of Diversify, it's a question. It's more of a case of if he holds his form, it's not going to matter if he runs on broken glass. He's going to be right there. I am of the vanguard of the belief of the school of fish that believes that I'm not so sure what he did in the Suburban and what he did in the Whitney, he can do it in the Breeders' Cup. But then again, every horse going into the Breeders' Cup, when we get to that stage, if some of these horses are fortunate enough, barring injury, to make it, I'm curious as to whether he can carry that form outside of New York, outside of Belmont, Saratoga, and Aqueduct, and perform in Louisville. And I think that this is his opportunity to step into the spotlight and become a star. He'll obviously have another prep. He's not going to run back in the Woodward. He will be running in the Jockey Club to defend his title there, if all goes well, and then ship to Louisville. That's, it would be hard. You would be hard pressed to convince me that for $6-7 million or however much whatever the purse structure is for the Classic, he's going to pass that race up, given the way that he's probably one of the top two or three contenders in the country. There'll probably be some European influence. We'll see what happens if we find another Giants Causeway in there, or another Saki that ran, of course, second to Tisnow when repeating as the Breeders' Cup Classic winner, the only horse to win the Breeders' Cup Classic back to back. And it's going to be very, very interesting to see, because Accelerate, along with Catalina Cruiser, the very impressive winner of the San Diego, who subbed for Accelerate in that local prep for the Pacific Classic, they're the top two horses, at least in theory right now. Accelerate's been off the charts. Can he carry his speed 1.25 miles on the East Coast? That's going to be another question. So it's a case of Diversify being able to go outside of New York and go a few miles down the street to Louisville, and it's another $64 question of the older horses from the West Coast being able to hold their form almost 3,000 miles away, coming to Kentucky. And we know that Bob Baffert and some of these other trainers out west have done relatively well in shipping their horses east, but still, it's a new situation, and it'll be very interesting to see if, in fact, amongst those horses, they'll be able to carry their form, provided they make it to the Breeders' Cup